So, good morning to everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Advances in Marine Forest Restoration under the European project AFRIMED. Just to introduce a little bit the context, we are virtually in France in this moment, and we are on the ICO platforms. ICO Solutions is an event that is co-organized by the Conservatoire du Littoral. We will have a presentation in a few minutes. The Aix-Marseille Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Rhône Méditerranée Corse French Water Agency. And it's an event that is working since January in islands, coasts, and ocean sustainable management and conservation, organizing several workshops, ateliers, which gather scientists, managers, companies, NGOs, and public organizations together. So the aim, the goal of this initiative is to build the concrete solutions to answer to island, coast, and ocean conservation issues in France, in the Mediterranean, but also at the international level. We wish to thank the ICO Solutions for including us, the AFRIMED project, that is an European Mediterranean project, in this initiative. And I let Cyrielle taking the floor for explaining you logistic things and also showing you a video of the organizer that unluckily was not able to be here today with us. Thank you, Cyrielle.
Thank you, Luisa. I will start with the video of Fabrice Bernard.
Hello, buenos dias. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish, but right now I'm in Spain, and it's why I'm not with you, and I'm very sorry for that. It would have been a pleasure to exchange with you. But I'm in Spain right now with partners and local communities to find the best way to protect the seagrass meadows around small islands that are under the pressure of anchoring for leisure boats. I'm working for the Conservatoire du Littoral, and the Conservatoire du Littoral have been created in 1975 in France to protect the coast by purchasing lands. And after that, the management is made by the local communities, the communes in France, or NGOs, to welcome peoples, to protect biodiversity, and to follow the development and the conservation of these lands. After we own these sites, we can't sell it anymore, and it's definitely protected. Right now, the Conservatoire du Littoral own more than 13% of the coast in France. Here today, the framework is the ICO Solution event. ICO means Île, Islands, Coast, and Oceans. And solution is very important in the title, because the idea is to have people from different origins, researcher, institute, ONG, NGOs, sorry, enterprise, startup, and national and local institutions that work all together to find the best way to restore, protect, and conserve island, coast, and ocean. The idea of this event was to create a parallel event of the IUCN Congress that have been cancelled in 2020, and it will probably happen during the early September, the next one. So the idea is to launch this event Eco Solutions in January, and to have several workshops, conference, and different webinars to exchange about these different needs and solutions for conservation. Today, we are very proud to have this partnership with EU AFRIMED project, because it's in line with all the previous workshop that we had about restorations, marine restorations, Posidonia conservation, etc. So we are very interested to have benefits from your exchanges, and to propose all the results of your workshop the 8th and 9th of September in Marseille, in parallel of the IUCN Congress, to present all the results of this workshop, all the solutions and needs for the future. Thank you again for this workshop. Sorry not to be there with you, and I will be with my heart with you during this workshop, and I hope to meet you in real very soon. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Cyril. Good morning to all the participants. I will share my desktop and my presentation. Okay, can you see it? Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the people organizing this nice webinar, and also Luisa to make it possible to build the connections between different actors in marine ecosystem restorations. I'm here today on behalf also of Roberto Danovaro, who is the coordinator of AFRIMED project, and all the AFRIMED consortium, which is composed by a lot of colleagues and people working on Cystoseira sensulato forest restoration. In this talk, I will give you a brief presentation, introduction to the project, and then I leave the floor to my colleagues for a more specific aspect that we are facing and we are analyzing in the project. AFRIMED project is dedicated to the restoration of Cystoseira sensulato forests along the Mediterranean Sea coasts, you can see in the slide our website, which functions for us as a portal to share information and connections. So if you want to contact us, you can easily find our contacts in the website. AFRIMED involves 8 European and also non-European countries, and we are 11 partners. The project is funded by the IASME agency and the European Maritime and Fishery Fund, and the project started in 2019 and will finish next year after an extension due to the COVID pandemic. Here there is the map of partners. We are 6 universities, 3 research institutes, 1 NGO related to the United Nations WCMC, sorry, and 1 small enterprise. And we are spread along the Mediterranean basin. Which is the problem? The problem is that we are analyzing is the habitat and biodiversity loss. We all know that we are facing the deterioration of coastal ecosystems. This deterioration of biodiversity and habitats is affecting also the marine life and indirectly the goods and services that marine ecosystems provide for the human well-being. This emergency is really evident for tropical ecosystems, but the emergency is also present along the Mediterranean coasts and in the Mediterranean habitats. The loss of habitats and biodiversity could provoke also the collapse of natural capital, defined as the amount of natural resources which provide us goods and services for our health and our well-being, comprising also economic and societal aspects. By 2013, the value of the natural capital must be integrated into new economic and financial planning and also agenda in new systems that are required for sustainable development for the future. The impact on coastal habitats and particularly on algal forests is very huge, and it has been recently calculated that these lead also to economic loss. The amount of the loss has been calculated as millions of euros, and independently if the the damage done is illegal or due to anthropogenic impacts in general. So we are losing a lot of biodiversity, a lot of ecosystem functions, and a lot of services and goods provided for our well-being. And it leads also to economic and social problems. The regression of forests dominated by Cystoseira sensulatus species have been documented and analyzed in the AFRIMED project, in which our colleagues were able to, we mapped all together the presence of actual forests, as you can see in the map on the top and right in the slide, and our colleagues were able to analyze the regression, to quantify and identify the sites along the Mediterranean coast in which the regression has become an emergency. This problem and the needs for solutions have been also recognized at international level, in particular by the European Union with the European Green Deal and the Biodiversity Strategy for the 20 and 30. Particularly in the European Green Deal, the European Union recognizes that it's essential to increase the value given to protecting and restoring natural ecosystems for a future in which the development will be sustainable and to protect and conserve the resources that we have and that we need for our future. In particular, this also falls into the United Nations goals for the sustainable development, in particular the goal number 14 and 15, which highlighted that we have to protect and conserve the biodiversity for our well-being in the future. From a scientific point of view, now we have the best protocols and techniques available because the restoration in marine ecosystems started since some years, for example, with the Project Mercies, which is one of the most important project funded by the European Union, and we took part, some of us took part also to Mercy's project, and now we have a lot of protocols scientifically based, so with a strong scientific basis to restore marine ecosystems. And this is also for Cystoseira species, Cystoseira sensulatus species. But we need more because now we have we know now that the restoration is possible, is feasible, but we need more. We need to scale up. We need to make ecosystems healthy again, and we need to restore as much areas as possible. And then we need also to cross European boundaries because the Mediterranean Sea is a shared basin among European countries and non-European countries. So we are sharing common resources and common ecosystems, and we really need transnational cooperation to restore marine ecosystems. As you can see by the graph, in the graph we analyzed the scientific literature regarding marine restoration, marine ecosystem restoration, and the studies have increased a lot during last years. But if you look at the map in the Mediterranean Sea, these actions, these studies have been conducted mainly in European countries. So we really need to make an extra effort to involve also the countries that are not in the European boundaries. This is because we are sharing resources, we are sharing ecosystems, we are sharing goods and services, and we need science-based conservation goals and develop a global framework to protect the Mediterranean Sea, to conserve it, and also to restore whenever it is possible, feasible, and needed. In the AFRIMED project, for this reason, our colleagues were able also to identify the priority areas for Cystozeira sensulatum restoration, species restoration. So we have a lot of knowledge about these aspects. But again, if you can see in the map, we need more data and information from the countries that are not inside the European boundaries. Also, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, recognizes the importance of marine ecosystem restoration, and also to involve the business sector in this framework, in this aspect, and in the conservation of natural ecosystems. For these reasons, in AFRIMED project, we are capitalizing the experience made in MERCIs, and we are continuing in creating a business club. This is a sort of legacy that through a portal in the website is sharing experiences, visions in order to involve public and private business sectors inside the problems of the ecosystem restoration. But we need even more. We need scientific basis. We need the actions, the synergy, the international synergy. We need the synergy with the business sector. But we need also policies. So to make affordable and effective restoration actions at a wider spatial scale, we need a link between science and policy. So we need that restoration actions are inside the environmental agenda at local, national, and international level. Another aspect that AFRIMED is taking care of is the connection with the society. First of all, we are, a lot of us are scientists, so first of all, we are really connected with the scientific communities, so AFRIMED will be part of 2 symposia dedicated to marine ecosystem restoration during the next World and European Congresses organized by the Society for Ecological Restoration. We are writing a lot of scientific papers to share the scientific knowledge needed for the basis, put the basis of ecological restoration, and we are very linked with conservation networks. Then we are trying to produce a lot of material to raise awareness in different sectors of the society. We recently released a short documentary with the MERCIs project on marine ecosystem restoration. We are active on social network, and we are trying to involve young students and young people to let them grow with in the framework with the ideas that the natural ecosystems, and more specifically marine ones, can be restored and need to be protected also for their future. Then we are also organizing with a lot of difficulties during the last year, but anyway, we are doing our best to organize events, local events for citizens, such as the European Night of Researchers with the local municipalities and etc. And then we have a very bi-directional dialogue with the agencies funding the project. So to conclude and to resume this talk, the AFRIMED project has been based on different pillars, which are science, first of all, and then society, blue economy, and policy. These are our addresses, social network accounts, if you wish to join our networks, our communities. And that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. Okay. Is there anybody? Okay.
Okay, if you want, I can pass the floor. I pass the floor to the next speaker, that is Simonetta.
Okay, good morning.
Fraschetti.
No, Simonetta is okay, it's more than enough. Okay, so I share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
perfectly.
Okay, very good. So thanks a lot, Luisa. Thanks a lot to all the colleagues organizing this very nice webinar, a new opportunity for all of us to stay together talking about restoration and finally trying to build a new generation of restoring people. So Silvia was already addressing the issue of habitat degradation and loss. And so the question rising from all these considerations is that is it possible to reverse present trajectories of changes? So is it possible to go to pre-disturbance and having again habitat in a good shape or not? And the idea with the restoration is that when changes in resource management and natural processes and conservation are not enough, are not in the position to recover a degraded habitat, so we think that restoration might be a good option. And so AFRIMED and Merches were working in this direction. As Silvia was already introducing, there are a number of national, international, but I would say global strategies, directive and legislation addressing the issue of restoration in a very explicit way. So, for instance, have a look to Target 14 in the Agenda 2030. Target 14 says protect and restore ecosystems, so it is something already there. Also, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive explicitly referred to restoration. The same consideration apply to the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, and recently, very recently, the European Union published this very nice report on the mission Starfish 2030, restore our ocean and waters. And finally, we do not have to forget that we are now in the UN decade of ecosystem restoration. So basically, all these directives are setting a vision, trying to say, okay, we have to protect our oceans, but at the same time, when mitigation is possible, then if conservation is not enough, please go for restoration. And there is also an important aspect that we have to take into account, the presence of a society, a scientific society for ecological restoration, which is an important framework to individuate international standard for going through restoration actions. And the Society for Ecological Restoration is a leading international organization working on science, practice, and policy of ecological restoration. And just now, or a few months ago, a very nice report was published with the international principles and standards for the practice of ecological restoration. I'm not going through the details, but what I like to mention is that basically ecological restoration is perceived as integrated with conservation and sustainable production. And also there is this idea that restoration investment should be based on strong, defensible and understandable scientific foundation. And the only point is that the marine environment is not central, despite the marine environment is the 70%, more than the 70% of the world story. So the second question is, but how much we know about marine restoration? Well, Silvia was already introducing some pieces of the story, but looking at planetary scale, and not only looking at the Mediterranean, we might say that there are many examples of ecological restoration. And the point is that most of them are concentrated in the northern part of the globe. There are also many examples across different habitats, but the highest number of studies is still recorded on estuarine and wetland system that are maybe more feasible than others to put the restoration into practice. And within this system, the most target habitat are salt marshes and seagrass and coral reefs. So there is a lot to do. Also in terms of spatial extent and duration of the experiment, because this analysis that it was basically a collaborative work that we hope to publish soon. Well, these analyses show that most restoration action and experiments were carried out at very small scale, which is a problem because in all these examples, let's say that we are not really addressing the scale at which human disturbance is operating. And also the temporal scale is not enough, I would say, because most examples are covering 1-2 years of monitoring after the restoration took place, but we really need more data in time and space. So the first conclusion after this very short and rough analysis is that for sure the number of restoration efforts across marine habitat are increasing, many examples, but still focus on few habitats and rarely approach at ecosystem level. So we are focusing maybe on macroalgae, but without considering other ecosystem components. So we have to enlarge our approach. And the knowledge across habitat is still very heterogeneous. And for many habitats, we are still in a very explorative phase. And the outcomes of even the best trained restoration methodology are still highly uncertain. And also this measure of success. So when I say my restoration experiment was a success, well, it's difficult to compare my result with the result and the perception of many colleagues. So we need to develop and to better frame our activities. And Merges, that was already mentioned by Silvia, was really an incredible attempt to increase our knowledge, expertise in this field. Merges was including an incredible number of partners, many colleagues working on this idea that central in restoration is the identification of key processes, allowing increasing restoration success, but also trying to make restoration more predictable through the definition of protocols for restoration actions, towards this attempt to scaling up restoration activities, but with this perspective that restoration should be framed in a changing ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, but all oceans are changing so fast under the pressure of climate changes. And so we have to restore today but thinking about future changes. So restoring today for tomorrow through a combination of laboratory and field experiments. And it was a great, I would say, a great success also in terms of collaborative effort and number of species involved in these restoration activities. This is just a very, I would say, short example coming from what we did from macroalgae and coralligenous formation. So you can see how many species were involved. And we were working in completely different ecological contexts. You see, we were working from Norway to Turkey, passing through Italy, Croatia, Spain, France. I mean, many, many countries, many groups involved with this idea to adopt the same approaches, but to infer general patterns. And as Silvia was saying, many deliverables, many scientific publications, so an important legacy also in terms of very nice example of success. And Emma Sebrian, who is in the group today, had such a big success testing recruitment enhancement in situ and ex situ, so adopting different methodologies and starting from a small restoration action covering just 4 sites and about 5 meters square, they were able to arrive to 100 square meters of macroalgal canopy. So they were able to increase the 20% of the natural area of an habitat which is considered a priority for the European Union. And another important outcome from merges that we are also trying to test in AFRIMED is the importance of synergistic interactions to support restoration. So combining active and passive restoration is the way to go. And here you have other 2 examples. One, again, from the Spanish colleagues that were removing herbivores both inside and outside a marine protected area, showing beautiful result in revegetation processes, and a large scale experiment on your right about 1 hectare of herbivore removal to see the recovery of disturbed habitat. So restoration is possible, scaling up is also possible, even though absolutely challenging. The point is that we have to put together different aspects. So we have to combine absolutely an increased knowledge of baseline information, life history traits, information that maybe are not really fashionable, are not really fancy to be published like they are, but they are fundamentally important for supporting restoration activities. Together with an increasing knowledge about biological and ecological processes. Not only that, we have to increase this collaborative effort. We really need the long-term monitoring. We have to overcome methodological problems and issues like the one of fighting against herbivores in case we are dealing with macroalgal restoration. And for sure, we have to incorporate the consideration of global changes, because as I was saying before, we cannot think of restore today without including the fact that the Mediterranean Sea and the other oceans are changing so fast. And more success stories. Have a look, for instance, to this attempt carried out in the North Sea, 300 hectares of intertidal salt marsh, together with 70 hectares of transitional brackish habitat, over 100 hectares of coastal grazing marsh and freshwater habitat. So really scaling up is possible. There are a lot of, let's say, new knowledge we are capitalizing on, and the same consideration applies for oyster reef, with hectares of habitat recovered. There is one aspect that, in my opinion, is very relevant, which is human capitalization. And in merges, we made the first training course on marine restoration in the Mediterranean Sea. The idea was to repeat and repeat this training, to have new, let's say, to form a new generation of restoring people, so new jobs, absolutely framed in a context of environmental sustainability. This consideration is really important. These opportunities are really relevant, especially considering the challenges that are coming from the blue growth, which is for sure an important new vision for the European Union. But I mean, increasing human activities will correspond to increase multiple stressors. So we have to be ready to mitigate and to restore the potential new degradation coming from these new activities. And this is why the European Union is investing so much. So Synergies, so AFRIMED, but also new calls from different institutions, Biodiversa, the Water JPI, the H2020, a lot of new calls asking for restoration upscaling. And so we have to be ready to answer to these new requests from the European Union. So a final comments, final, let's say, suggestions coming from and challenges coming from this experience we are carrying on all together. First of all, we have to combine and to collect new data on degraded marine habitats. Basically, still we don't have enough information about where to decide and to implement new restoration activity, because, for instance, for the Mediterranean Sea, there are many areas in which we don't have absolutely no information. So deciding also where to start is not so easy. And then we have for sure to identify and monitoring indicators and thresholds to measure large-scale restoration efficiency and success. We have to apply the best technological, but also non-technological and social solution with, like today, an important stakeholder participation for sustaining and monitoring restoration success. Silvia was introducing the concept of the cost associated to restoration. This is an important issue because we have really to provide robust cost-benefit analysis of the effect of sustainability of this attempt towards upscaling. And another important point is to identify the public and private partnership, cross-sectoral collaboration, and different forms of participation in marine restoration governance arrangement. And also, we are thinking about the development of innovative co-funding and crowdfunding for support a new marine restoration activity to accelerate investment for promoting marine coastal restoration. And concluding, all these new actions that we have to put in place, it is also because we think that marine restoration projects in general are really under-evaluated, because the idea is that restoration can do something, but it's not enough. We agree, we have to combine different strategies, conservation and restoration and mitigation, but we are really sure that what we are doing and the money that we are using and all the activities, the collaboration that we are setting up are really an important indication for the future of our habitat in the Mediterranean Sea and outside. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Simonetta, for this very, very interesting and enriching presentation. on the challenges that we are facing under the biodiversity strategy. And so if you have questions, do not hesitate to use the question box so that Simonetta can answer you directly, or we can discuss it also later at the end of the presentation in the discussion. And so now I invite Emma to tell us if it's possible or not to recover an extinct forest. I know the answer.
Hello, do you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much to the organization, all of you, to giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit more on what can be done in terms of marine restoration, and especially restoration of marine macroalgal forests. After this talk, or with this talk, I would like to give you, or to consolidate the message that restoration is possible. And in contrast to what many people may think, it's not a great challenge in terms that we need a high technology, but probably it's a big challenge because we need basic knowledge that sometimes is not available, okay? Especially when we talk about these macroalgae forests. I'm based in the Center of Advanced Studies of Plants, and it's a lab very close to an area like this. It's in Costa Brava, with nice places like this, and we are very lucky. But I think that also all my colleagues that we joined at AFRIMED, we are very lucky working in labs close to these areas. And I think that it's because of that, it increases our interest in promoting the conservation of these ecosystems, especially the shallow rocky ecosystems. The shallow rocky ecosystems are dominated by, or should be dominated by, canopy forming macroalgae, and are one of the most productive and biodiversity rich ecosystems on the earth. I always like to explain that this canopy macroalgae can form extensive and structurally complex underwater stands that are very, very similar to that terrestrial forest. They can create this macroalgae, this canopy macroalgae are also known to be a structural species because they provide this three-dimensional structure, providing habitat and also modifying environmental conditions under the canopy, modifying the light intensity, providing habitat, modifying turbulences, and so providing good condition for many, many species to stay there. Not also a great biodiversity of macroalgae, here we can see, but also we can find raised suspensivores, sponges, echinoderms, great biodiversity within this canopy forest. Finally, this is a photograph of Mediterranean forest. They can provide a broad range of valuable ecosystems, goods and services, such as can be nutrient cycling, coastal protection, and habitat and protection for many commercial species. So it's because of that, all these habitats are under protection by the European Habitat Directive, okay? However, Silvia and Simonetta have explained it before. Not all these systems are well preserved. In contrast, some of them are really have suffered a great degradation. The reasons are several. We can talk about habitat destruction, overgrazing, pollution, climate change, invasive species, etc. But what we want, and not me, all the colleagues that we are within AFRIMED project, what we want is to revert and to shift this situation and to look for new solutions that can help us to have better or well-preserved macroalgae forests. What we know is that the first thing we need to do is to prevent any impact, the mitigation. As Simonetta said before, is the first thing we want to do is to conserve. Then, if it's needed, we will try to restore an habitat. But if the impact is affecting this habitat is still there, we won't be able to restore anything. It would be a waste of time. So the first things to do is to mitigate impact. When it's done, we know that, for example, if the problem, the degradation was due to the poor water quality, we have to improve the water quality of the area, or the degradation was due to the outbreak for grazers. The first thing we need to do is to control the grazer population. Okay. However, even it's done, we know that in these macro canopy forests do not recover naturally. Why? There are different reasons, but one reason can be that the remaining populations we have, they are very unconnected. The remaining populations are very far one from each other, and these species are known to be to have low dispersal capacity and to have low dynamics. And because of that, is then that we need to help them to reverse this situation by means of active restoration action. They need a little help of us to shift this degraded situation. It's because of that recently has increased a lot the interest for exploring new techniques on the restoration of these populations. The first ideas were, and the first proposal were about adult transplantation. So you take adult individuals from a donor area and you put them in an area you want to restore. However, having in mind the critical conservation status of all these populations, we have always been pushing to use other non-destructive methods where you don't need to manipulate adults, like is the recruitment enhancement method. I will explain you a little bit more after. With the recruitment enhancement method, you don't need to move any adult population. What you only need to have is these fertile branches. Fertile branches with the gametes, and then you will take zygotes that will form a new recruit. These new recruits will be put in the area you want to restore. Okay? So the first thing we need to know is when we have to go to the field and to find these fertile branches when we have mature gametes. For this, we need to know the phenology of the different species. And as I said at the beginning, this information, this basic knowledge on the ecology and biology of these species sometimes is lacking. And it is the case. The information that we have of the phenology of the species is partial and inaccurate. And it's because of that, within AFRIMED, we decided to study deeply the phenology of these species. When we will find mature gametes or these fertile branches with mature gametes of the different species. Taking advantage of the consortium, we are different people from different geographic areas. We said, okay, we will study the phenology of all the species we have in our areas. Okay, using the same methods. And also we will study the environmental variables that will determine and probably will be crucial in determining the phenology period. Okay, as we think that it won't be homogeneous in all the areas, what we want to do is to provide you an accurate calendar with the real phenology of the different species and how and at the different areas, and also how maybe temperature can be determining this. After that, we will be able to have these fertile branches for the different species at different regional areas of all the Mediterranean. Once we have these fertile branches, we are ready to start the restoration actions. As we explain it in one article, it can be this recruitment enhancement method. It can be done using different techniques. You can put these fertile branches in situ, and it's good. And then the zygotes will fall down to the substrate in the area you want to restore. Okay, and this is can be done. It's easy and maybe cheaper, but it can only be done if you are working or you want to restore an area with low hydrodynamic, sheltered areas or deep population. However, if you want to restore an area with high hydrodynamics, where the zygotes of the fertile branches can be swept out and the water column and won't fall down to the substrate you want to restore, then it's probably you will need to use the ex situ method. With the ex situ, you put the fertile branches in aquarium and you culture the recruits. And when they are few months old, you can put them in the area you want to restore, okay? This method, as I said, it's very useful when you have a high hydrodynamics, but it's also very useful when you have great grazing pressure in the early stages of this algae. Probably Luisa will talk about this later, okay? However, with this method, you have to know, again, basic knowledge. We need to know which are the best environmental conditions to culture these branches, which are the best conditions in terms of irradiance or temperature to have as much as recruits as possible. For this, we are exploring the different species, also the best conditions in terms of irradiance and temperature. And as the first site, we can tell you that the irradiance has to be moderate, not only for the deep species, but also for the shallow species. We guess that it's because the recruits of the shallow species, although living in high irradiance habitats, they usually grow under the canopy of the adults. So then, under the canopy, always the irradiance is also moderate. In terms of temperature, shallow populations can be cultured in a wider range of temperature condition, whereas the deep populations need to be at colder temperatures, okay? Better. Anyway, once you know that, and whatever the method we are using, after few months, we will have few recruits that can be settled in the new area you want to restore. Once you have this information, maybe you will think, okay, now I know how to get new recruits in some stones, but is it possible that with this method we are able to recover an extinct marine forest? Then it's just upscaling that. It's different to talk about the stone and recruits and then to talk about the restoration of a forest. And if it's possible, there are more questions. How many strats with recruits do we need? How many times we need to do that? How much does it cost? Simonetta was telling the importance of providing cost of the restoration actions also. I will try to respond that with the example that also already Simonetta was explaining to you, that we of a successful, we can say successful restoration action that it was done many years ago. So now we have the historical expertise to provide you with these answers, okay? This first restoration action started in the 2011. It was done in a Menorca Bay, close to the Mao Harbor. I don't know if you know this area. It's a very nice area. Menorca is a pristine site, but Mao Harbor had a very bad quality, water quality during the 80s, okay? So one population was extinct during the 80s, probably because of the water quality. Then water quality improved because the sewage treatment. And in the 2011, Marta Salas, she was doing the PhD with Sistoseida in Menorca. She started a restoration action. It was small. It was just an assay to see how the ex situ and in situ methods work. So we started with 4 sites, 2 for the ex situ and 2 for the in situ, of 4 teeny patches of 5 square meters. Okay, we were monitoring this area, and after 3 years, this area increasing because the adults, the recruits we put there, after 1 or 2 years, they become fertile and they provided new individuals to the population. So these first 20 meters, square meters, after 3 years, they were 50 square meters. And in the 2017, it was a patch of 1 square meters. Okay, and then the size structure of the population was more or less similar to the donor population. Finally, we can say in the 2019 that probably we are talking about a restoration success because the patch is close to 1,000 square meters. It was the last cartography that it was done for a colleague of us, Maria Elena Cefali, and we will see this year how it is. But now I can tell you that we don't need to stay or to go there many times to provide a lot of substrate, because if the conditions are favorable, the recruits will grow and will provide new individuals, and we will have self-maintaining population that will expand alone. Okay, here is the image of the cartography that it was done by Maria Elena. So here, I have explained in you a happy end history, but it's not the only thing that we have tried. We have tried to do this restoration in many other sites. We have some successful histories, as the one I have explained in you in Menorca, another one in Catalonia, but of course, we also have a lot of some failures. We have a failure in Medas Islands, and it was because the overgrazing for sea urchins. Also some failures because of overgrazing, also Salemas and sea urchins overgrazing in south of Italy. We had a mass mortality of a population we restored due to a marine heat wave in North Catalonia, and also another population did not was not viable because of the pollution conditions. Okay, so not everything are good news, but also these failures can be an opportunity to find solutions, because there are problems that we will have to face in the future if we really rely on the restoration possibilities. So we have to think, and Luisa will talk about that, but the problem that overgrazing can be in terms of restoration, and to think how we can avoid this impact, but also bearing in mind that global change is there. As Simonetta was explaining before, we have to take advantage of the evolutionary adaptation of the species and probably find for the species or populations that are more resistant to these global stressors, and then use them as the donor populations. Okay. Finally, one of the questions, and it's not and it's an important one, is how much does it cost? Simonetta was already raising this issue. I know she thinks that it's important we can provide good numbers to the manager and the people interested in doing restoration actions, but this is for me, it's one of the most difficult questions we have to respond. We know that there are fixed budgets, we will have the personal cost, the material and facilities, but the proportion of these budgets will strongly depend on the species we want to restore or the area we want to restore, if it's very close or it's very far from our facilities. Also, the expertise we will have of the team, it's really important. It will determine if we will waste more money or not. Finally, you know that the proportion within in situ and ex situ method will strongly change our budget. Okay, so but at least it's going to be thousands of euros. The last the successful restoration, I explained it before, was about 5,000, between 5,000 and 7,000 euros. okay? And it was the best situation you can have. Shallow species, 100 meters from the facilities in an area with people with a great expertise on the species and the populations and the environmental conditions of the area. So at least we are talking about this kind of versions. Then we have to decide, no? The question is it a lot? Is it not? And I think that it's a question that you should answer yourself. But I have to say that with this restoration action, we were able to recover an extinct population. And it's the only, we have to think that this species was only present in the northern area of this Menorca Island. And now we have added a population that is going to be the 15, maybe the 20% of the total area of this species we have in Menorca Island. Not in Menorca Island, but also in all Balearic Islands, because there are no remaining species of these populations, neither in the Spanish continental coast. So, is it expensive if we have increased the 20% of this natural, of this priority habitat with this money? I think that we will all convey that it's not expensive. Probably it's worth it to try it, okay? Finally, as Sylvia was saying, we don't want to stop here. We want to, we ask ourselves if we are ready to scaling, if it's possible to restore this macroalgae forest. And the answer, as Luisa was saying, yes. I think that yes, we can. But for this, we need to enroll new actors, share these techniques, and it's because of that we are here. And finally, do not forget the basic knowledge, because this is what we need to know which species we need to use, or which species or population are the most resistant to the global station that at the end we will have in the near future. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that I helped to consolidate this message, that it can be done. We need your help, and please follow us in our social media because we are very happy to share our results and our experience with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma, for this very nice and positive and giving hope presentation. And now I'm going to compensate. No, I'm joking, but I'm going to take the floor and talk to you a little bit of some context-dependent restoration action and how the context is important for restoring marine forest. Okay, I share my screen. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so you know, we are talking about marine forests, as Emma and the others also already mentioned. I just wanted to bring you back, or I mean, again, in this ecosystem that is probably the more productive and rich in temperate marine ecosystems. And here you can see the Cystosera sensulato species. That it's very difficult for specialists to stop talking about Cystosera, including all the species, but we will get it. You know that this genus have been splitted in 3, but will get used. So the Cystosera species, sensulato, are several. We have more than 30 species that are endemic of the Mediterranean Sea, so something that is very, very important from a conservation point of view. Their identification is unluckily quite difficult. It's very hard sometimes to know exactly which species we are dealing with, but with the molecular tools in AFRIMED project, we are going to try to disentangle a little bit this issue, because there are several consequences on this difficult identification. For example, that historical data are very rare, and also the actual distribution is poorly known. And as Emma said, we are still lacking, for the different species, ecological knowledge, and for example, the phenology that she was mentioning. So Emma already told you that these species are long-living, probably the longest living algae that we know, and that they are characterized by a short dispersal, and these two characteristics are very important when considering restoration actions. I like to divide, in order to try to simplify, the different forests in function of where they thrive. So we very often talk about a shallow exposed forest in contraposition to the sheltered ones that are in sheltered areas, but also can be found in rock pools, and that actually have a very important role, the rock pools, in the conservation of Mediterranean marine forests. Then we have the infralittoral species that are thriving in the photophilic zones. Here you have a picture of Brachycarpa forest in Sardinia, and the deep forests that are probably the less well known, that can thrive up to by up to 50, 60 meters, and where we can also find the couple of species of laminaria that are present in the Mediterranean, and that are being studied at present in very interesting projects, but they are not the focus of this presentation. So Emma and also Silvia already, and Simonetta already introduced us to the fact that Mediterranean marine forests are in decline. And in this map, you can see some places and some paper based on historical data and present distribution showing the decline of these species. And Silvia showed us the interesting models that are going to be produced, that have been produced in the framework of MERCI's and AFRIMED project, so that allow to quantify the decline of marine forests. And in any case, probably the most emblematic case has been recorded in the Côte des Alberts in France, near Spain, where several species are considered locally extinct, and only one species not in regression. Several drivers, human impacts, can be blamed for this situation, like habitat destruction that is affecting in particular the shallow forests, decrease in water quality, as Emma mentioned below, that can be pollutants, but also turbidity and sedimentation rate increase. Then we have physical damage that we often don't consider probably enough, like mooring and fishing activities that are affecting the infralittoral forest, and trampling that is affecting the shallow ones. And a bunch of biotic factors that are like herbivory, competition, and biological invasion. All this, as Emma already showed you, is to be inserted in the context of climate change. And we have to take into account, of course, that all these drivers are often interacting with synergistic potential effects. But in a positive perspective, we have to consider that several efforts have been made and are made present in since the recent decades in order to reduce such drivers. So Emma brought out the case of the Mao Harbor in Menorca, where the water quality increased, and then therefore the conditions were favorable to a restoration, a successful restoration. So habitat destruction is now much more controlled. The water quality is increasing in the European waters, at least, with the several directives and actions that are performed. Also, physical damage is much more controlled, especially the mooring is now much more environmental friendly, and so on. The most tricky drivers are probably the biotic ones, that are the ones that we are less good in controlling. And this is the reason I would like to make a focus on herbivory, because we are talking about forests. And we have to take into account this regulating factor that is a natural and an important regulating factor in marine forests. So you probably all know this story involving kelp forests and sea urchins and sea otters that drove the attention to the fact that sea urchins are really very effective herbivores in the temperate areas, are considered the sheeps that I showed you before, so that they are considered the most effective herbivores in marine forests. Here we are in the Pacific Ocean, but you know that we observed exactly the same phenomenon at a different scale of seaweed's size in the Mediterranean Sea. So here you can see the activity of sea urchins that can create barren grounds that are a real desertification of the Mediterranean Sea in a very short lapse of time, due to these very fast sea urchin proliferations that are usually linked to the overfishing of their predators, the natural predators that are sparids, and also, and Silvia already talked to you about the very destructive date mussel illegal fishery that is still present in several areas of the Mediterranean, and that is very, that has a lot of consequences, also economic, as Silvia told before. But in absence of sea urchins, some experiment, probably among the first experiment on Schistosera forest restoration, showed a high grazing pressure also in exposed shallow forest where sea urchins were not observed. And so some caging experiments allowed to show that also herbivorous fish can be very efficient grazers in these ecosystems. And interestingly, in temperate areas, fish herbivory has traditionally been considered negligible compared to sea urchin grazing pressures. And actually it was more driven to the attention in recent decades, while tropical herbivorous fish, several species of tropical herbivorous fish are expanding their range from tropics, and they are invading temperate areas and causing impressive regime shifts around the world. Here you have a very nice review that brings some example. And to this example, we probably should also add this native fish grazing pressure, as we observed in the Mediterranean, but this is a huge simplification. There is a wide amount of literature about all this, and salamas are not grazing marine forest only in the Mediterranean Sea, but this is not really the objective. What we wanted to do, it was to try to quantify the effect of this native herbivorous fish on Schistosera forest. And here you can see an experiment that we set up a few years ago, thanks to a newly conceived deterrence device that we call the fish, in this exposed Schistosera mentacea forests in France. Here you see the setup of the experiment and the very clear marks of bites of salamas in the primary ramification of Schistosera, Ericaria mentacea, sorry. So we were able to show that salamas can reduce the biomass of Schistosera by up to 86% and reduce the reproductive potential by up to 97%. So this gives a first first idea of the importance that salemas can have on the long term in threatening marine forest, and not only the restoration actions that are affected eventually by this, but also on the natural marine forest. And in particular, if we take into account that these are FAO data, that salema densities seem to be irregularly, more or less regularly, increasing in the last decades. So the first restoration actions that were, it's not really restoration, but forestation actions that were performed in France on harbor dikes in order to increase the ecological values of this ecological environment, had to face this phenomenon of Salemas herbivory. And as a result, it was proved actually that the recruitment that was based on enhanced recruitment using receptacles was efficient, and that was working very well, because a few months after the restoration there were a lot of recruits. But the survival, development, and fertility of these recruits were highly affected by grazing. So salemas are for sure has to be quantified before restoration action, probably, and we need probably innovation to try to deal with this problem. But in other environments, we can also find several other grazers that, in case of restoration action, prove to have consumptive, like grazing, and not consumptive disturbance action on the recruitment and the settlement of Cystosera. And here you can see limpets, hermit crabs, we have gastropods and crabs. And very little is known about the importance of these grazers on the equilibrium of the forests, and especially of mesograzers. Here you can see some of them. I really suggest you to follow this Instagram page that is very nice and very updated. Recent studies in restoration ecology dealing with marine forests are trying to deal, actually are dealing with the grazing pressure where necessary, because we luckily have also several examples, Emma showed us, where the grazing pressure is not a limiting factor, and so the restoration is doesn't need any defense or any control of herbivores. Here you can see a few recent examples that took into account this issue. For example, several herbivores at the same time, or making selective exclusions, or protecting with cages. For example, Adriatic, that was done in Italy by Laura Tamburello, Martina Orlando in Adriatic, and the interesting experiment also performed by Alba Medrano with including the passive restoration of removal of sea urchins, an experiment we performed in Montenegro, and also again in the Adriatic Sea, some little structure that are like flowers and allow the protection of the recruits and the juveniles from herbivores. And there are also some new ideas like producing artificial rock pools in artificial structures. And here you can see some experiment that we are performing in the framework of Margarida Montserrat PhD in the AFRIMED project, with the preliminary results that show that after 9 months we can have little Cystosera of 10 centimeter size. Just to tell you a few words about the experiences we are doing here in France. Actually, we have the chance of working in a place where the decline and potential local extinction of several species have been assessed by previous studies based on historical data and fine mapping. And especially I wanted to highlight this importance of fine mapping to really assess the eventual presence of local populations that are still there, eventually very disconnected, as Emma said, but still present, and that can be used as donor population. Here you see, for example, in Lerans Island, we found several rock pools where this population are still present with several interesting species. And so we are working with this, and I also wanted to bring your attention to the fact that we are working in close collaboration with the managers of the two Natura 2000 sites that are present in the area, and that are also interesting both for the presence of donor population or for the presence of historical data, and that they are associated partners of AFRIMED project, so they supported the project since the very beginning. And I will let Nadia in a few minutes talk to you about the importance of these synergies. And in conclusion, my take-home message is that we have to consider the diversity of Mediterranean marine forests that are formed by several species that are thriving in different environments for hydrodynamic conditions and depths and light and all the environmental factors, and also biotic factors, of course. Multiple drivers also. We also have a diversity of drivers that act in synergy at different scales and that have species-specific effects, because every species react to these drivers in different ways. So we have to take into account this diversity, and the priority when we want to implement a restoration action is probably, first of all, to do a fine mapping in order to find the potential donor populations and to see the connectivity of the present populations. Consider the species ecology and also the driver effect, the driver that are present eventually, and which are the effects on the species if they can be controlled. So all that Emma said about mitigation of the impacts, and also try to include biotic drivers, even if they are not considered the cause of decline of the species in this area, including the context of climate change. So a case-by-case approach is preferable. As Emma said, restoration, ecological restoration of marine forests is possible. And we have to apply a case-by-case approach, taking into account the specific context of every action that is needed. And of course, I want to highlight also the added value that is given from the collaboration among different stakeholders that Nadia is now going to detail more. So I thank you all for your attention, and I leave the floor to Nadia.
Okay, wait a minute until I share my screen. Okay, so this talk is about stakeholder involvement in restoration, and it's all about stronger together. So, oh, no, I cannot change my slides. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, So how you did it? Okay, so our overall goal, objective, is to raise the awareness of the different stakeholders to the loss of the Mediterranean forest, so we are all in a position together to make a difference. And how we go about this, we have 3 ways to achieve our goal. Is to create a business club, to organize targeted stakeholder meetings. We have 2 meetings down the line, and we hope to compile best practices on the issue. So stronger together, the first thing we do is to create a business club, and to do that we have 4 tasks to accomplish this, and this is to compile a list of geographically representative stakeholders from all the aspects, the relevant public and private stakeholders who share an interest in the conservation and restoration, to create a specific business club page where updates on the restoration issues or case studies outcomes will be showcased and shared with involved people, to have regular updates with business-related articles on the project's newsletters, and to get your views and feedback on your expectations and connecting with us through the questionnaire on expectations, which you can find on our AFRIMED webpage or live in the chat. So we're not starting from zero, luckily. We built on the successful Mercedes Business Club, where there were a lot of dedicated webinars and newsletters, and which are still available through the Mercedes website and a YouTube channel. So a couple relevant ones will be moving to industrial scale coral habitat restoration, where industrial partners looked at using industrial techniques for harvesting and release. Building a business case for marine restoration, where we look through different ecosystems, obviously not just Cystoceira for Mercedes, because Mercedes looked at many different habitats, shallow and deep, and also private finance in marine ecosystem restoration. It was beautiful, well-attended webinars. I invite you to have a look. We also had a very good array of articles, collaborative articles, not just from Mercedes cases, but from the restoration world, from partners from Europe, but also across from other areas, where we showcase important elements, important activities, important collaborations. For example, the correlate engine, collaborative restoration in the deep sea between science partners and fishers, between collaborations between recreational diving business and business and science partnerships. And one relevant, by accident I had it already selected as a good example, the best elements example, which is a partnership that led to the development of a company that is now working and testing and promoting restoration through biodegradable structures for support of the restoration experiments in mussel restoration, in seagrass restoration, in salt mass restoration. It's the best elements side, where again you can find lots of information in the company, in the consortium group, but also in the Mercedes Business Club page, where we show these examples of how they have been used in the different cases. So when you move from a simple experiment, how you then apply these techniques without impacting the environment by putting a lot of plastic in the sea and in the natural environment. So that this is what it is all about. Stronger together, finding sustainable solutions. Okay, so the Business Club for AFRIMED. We hope to create a forum for the restoration community for the Mediterranean, for the Cystoceira, and it will be a place where we'll exchange documents and reports and publications, and our success stories, but also we want to share and hear from your own success stories and any lessons learned. So We will highlight a few of the examples we have prepared, but we certainly want to, we will build more, and we want to hear more from you all. And we have seen some of the messages in the chat and have taken note of this. So thank you very much for that as well. So our first example, as Louisa said, it's Didier. It's an example of a stakeholder and a partnership between an MPA manager and the university. Then it's another example of a site, a Natura 2000 manager, again building forces with the university in field actions and in support of management actions and plans. Because AFRIMED works with non-EU member states, so we also have examples from Tunisia here, from a underwater sports club where they participate in various environmental projects, and a partnership in Albania where an MPA is teaming up with the laboratory in Albania to do restoration experiments. Then a Spanish example at the Menorca Biosphere Reserve, where they partner with scientists to do restoration actions. New tools, so we present new tools and new findings. For example, the herbivorous deterrent device that Louisa was talking about. And with an eye to the future, and COVID allowing us, and with our work in our case studies progresses sufficiently, we plan to have 2 stakeholder meetings where we will first present all the outcomes from our case studies, and then later on we'll bring the experience from this with stakeholder feedback and with involving stakeholders to issues that relate to upscaling the restoration. And again, we will have framed questionnaires about this meeting, so we can have solid feedback from you all. And our final goal is to compile the best practices for reforestation in the Mediterranean Sea. And again, we will do it together, and we'll plan to produce a flow chart as a decision tool, which will be publicly available, and which will allow the stakeholders to know when an action is worth considering and which preconditions should be implemented before, so to guarantee restoration success. Updating and building new connections, this is what we want to do. This is what we constantly do. So please do join us. Please do fill in the survey. Do connect with us to create this bigger restoration community and make a difference. Do let us know of your expectations by filling in the survey. We have planned many actions for the year and conference talks and a symposia. So I hope you can join us there too. But before we close, and although there are other good initiatives, we would like to honor our host. So we'll put the spotlight in France, because France, Allele Bleu, they're doing quite good work, and there is a very constructive dynamic on restoration that represents an example that could replicate it in several Mediterranean countries. And it's an example of cooperation among researchers, technicians, managers, decision makers, consultants, business, and it's highly supported by the French Water Agency. So it's something to look up to and to try to replicate. It started simply a dozen of years ago with the goal to restore the nest function in a shallow coastal ecosystem through a life project, but then it took on and became something much bigger. And this driver approach is supported by the French Water Agency and includes a large amount of stakeholders. So reaching out to a lot of people. The water agency, as I said, supported the driver approach, accelerated the process, fostered interactions, project building, and valorization of results, and implemented several actions, several different types of actions, for example, in harbors, in modified environments, in mooring zones, and in wastewater affected zones. Also, several publications have been realized in this context, and they are available for the website, so I invite you to have a look at those. And a few examples of the actions implemented: replenishment of fish assemblages, artificial fish nursery, the biohat experiment, action, Mediterranean Posidonia meadow restoration in mooring zones, and the garden and harbor dikes with Cystoceira that Louisa was talking about. And there we go again. Sorry. I cannot move it again. Okay, so if you're interested in the activities, the French activities performed in the driver context, please see this previous but very, very good ISO webinar that was done some days ago, and it has a lot of good examples there from France. So many thanks to the ISO initiative for including us, including AFRIMED project in this fantastic event and facilitating further valuable interaction with stakeholders. Many thanks indeed to all of you for participating and hear us all out and connecting with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for this presentation. So we are trying to answer your questions in direct in the question box. So I don't know very well how it works. So I think I clicked answer in direct to some question I was trying to write. But I think that now we can start the discussion. So as you prefer, you can both use the chat or the question box, or also raise your hand and pose the question. So we have Benoit that is, and Margarita that are also following the questions and answering, and so that can eventually, I can't find the word, moderate this discussion question. So do not hesitate if you have questions. In the meanwhile, I'll try to answer the two questions I was trying to answer in the question box.
Yes, so there is Caroline Bourgeois who wants to intervene. So Caroline, I will open your micro, and you can now open your mic if you want to speak.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for all the presentation. It has been very interesting. I am a volunteer in a Coral Garden organization, NGO, for coral restoration. Our association exists for 12 years, and we have started in Indonesia, as I said in the conversation, about the support to restore coral transportation. We have been used for many years that we were welding to make the grid and transplant corals in Seraya Besar, close to Komodo Park in Flores, West Flores. And for the last 1 or 2 years now, we are experimenting some trials with bamboo knitting on top of still metallic support, because we need to have the feet to transplant the corals in shallow water. Normally it's about 8 meters deep. So I want to mention these experimentals, and despite the fact that bamboo is more how to say damaged with the time and the currents, we do have quite good results on the transportation success, because we do have a team there with Indonesian fishers, so they are deeply implicated and our first ambassador in the area to overfishers, and they are monitoring once a month all the corals transplanted. So the area is well monitored with number, sectors, and so on. And we do see a lot of fishes back, small to big ones. As I mentioned, we saw sharks. We now have a really shark nursery next to the transportation area in Pulau Atamin. And we have also seen some manta rays. So it's really a great success, I would say, after 12 years. And recently, only since October, so we don't have enough feedback, of course, we are starting partnership with Equilibrio Marino in Spain, in Punta de la Mora. And so the first step was to clean, because the area was extremely damaged with fish nets, plastics, everything you can find, unfortunately. So Spanish divers in the area helped us, and we have started the first coralligen area transportation only from January. So we hope to have as well a good success. It's different, because in Indonesia it's art corals, so it's a different type. But it's another interesting project. We hope to succeed in Spain.
Okay, thank you, Caroline, for this interesting intervention. We have other questions from Taous Moulay, who is asking, do you have any restoration project for Posidonia oceanica? So who wants to answer the question? Simonetta?
I can answer. Yes, I can answer. I do not have presently any project on Posidonia restoration, but as I was writing in the chat section, the zoological station of Naples is now very much involved in this restoration project called Abaco. And I can send the email contact, because Luigi Musco is following the project with other colleagues. And apparently they were obtaining very nice result with some new, well, it's not really a new method, it's partially new. It is following basically what has been done in Sicily by Fabio Badalamenti et al. There are, I think, a couple of publications showing the importance of selecting, let's say, good substrate to have new recruits of Posidonia. So I can provide in the chat section the email address to have direct contact. I'm going to do it now.
Yes, I also added in the chat section the contact of one person of Spain that I think that he was working on a project paid by Red Eléctrica Española because they had to put a cable in one area of the Balearic Islands, and they were paid to try to restore. And they have also the first results. Check out the IMEDEA page and look for Jorge Terrados, but I think that the techniques used are very similar to what Simonetta was explaining. Now they are focusing in trying to see if a seedling can be a good method. The point is that if Cystoceida are low dynamics, Posidonia is much more low dynamic. So in terms of human scale, restoration of Posidonia oceanica is still quite hard, and maybe I'm not but I would push for conservation. In this case, I would push for conservation. It's also the same problem we have with hard corals, probably.
Yeah, I can add that there's been many attempts of restoration of Posidonia in the Monaco area, and indeed, the success is probably not as good as with Cystoceria. Silvia?
Yeah, I put in the chat the link to the YouTube documentary we shared within Mercies and AFRIMED. And in the documentary, you can see Luigi explaining the approach they used for Posidonia oceanica in Abaco project.
Thank you. Any other questions? There's no more question. Okay. Here is a question from Orestes Papadakis, who's asking my question. What is your opinion on Cystoceria subspecies forest restoration in eastern and especially southeastern Mediterranean, where the invasive Signatus population are huge? Who wants to answer that?
If you like, I can start.
But
I think that we will all agree. I think in our presentation, the first thing we have said is that the first thing we have to do is to mitigate the impact. I'm not from, probably our colleagues from the eastern part will explain you better. I've been diving there in several field trips, and the impact of Siganus can be huge. There you don't have any problem with invasive macroalgae, for example, because there are no macroalgae. Then if you still have the abundance of Siganus as it is, and I'm very fan of the macroalgae restoration, but there a good start for another action, that it has to be the control. And I cannot give you good ideas, but it has to be the control of the razor population. If not, we can spend a lot of effort, time, money, and it won't work. What do you think, Simon?
I totally agree with Emma. And recently, Sylvain Giacumi, she was on holidays making tours around the Greek island, and she started to see that Siganus is entering in the restaurant food. Okay, so they are starting to fish and to use it for not only for tourists, for everybody. So. Let's say the control exerted by fishery could be a solution, but still far to be a real one. Okay, so let's see. For the moment, what, for instance, Gil Rilov is saying, a colleague from Israel, is that they are looking for big functional changes that for the moment the restoration activities that we are trying to put into practice in the Western Mediterranean, as Emma was saying, are really not feasible for the Eastern area. So we have to eat a lot of those fishes.
Thank you, Simonetta. Here in Nice, we are trying to develop projects trying to encourage the fishers to get interested into these new species, and also the cooks, trying to get cooks to be interested in how to use these fishes in order to prepare the future. There's another question which was, how can we measure the pollution in order to know if Cystoxera restoration is possible? Who wants to answer that question?
If you like, I can start again. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. This is not so easy because pollution. You can have different sources of pollution. You can say, okay, I will try with a nutrient input. That is a very important thing. So you can go to the probably water quality agencies of each government, and you need to have some data on that. But there are also other pollutants that can also affect the viability of your restoration and that are not easily analyzed. For example, the glyphosate, for example. We saw that glyphosate can be an important pollutant affecting the viability. If you want to start a restoration, what I would say is first try to do it in areas where you know that historically there were Cystoxera. So then you know that this habitat is good for the Cystoxera. And then maybe you can do an assay just with some other bioindicators. If you have a very, very shallow Cystoxera, it may say that pollution is not so high, so you can start with other Cystoxera, etc. Sometimes it's difficult to analyze water quality because you have very different drivers. I don't know if the others are agree. Nutrients is the easiest thing, and we know that Cystoxera are very vulnerable to high nutrient outloads, but maybe you have other in agricultural areas that can affect the viability of your populations. So I'm not very exact, and it's not so easy, but just also look around what you have in your areas. If you have urbanization, or if you have with no water treatment, or you have a lot of agriculture around, maybe you will have some even low and cryptic pollution can affect the viability of the restoration. Do you want to add something?
No.
I can only agree with them. The point is that let's say there are for instance, the water framework directives and the marine strategy framework directive telling us, at least on theory, what is good and what is not. The point is that all these stressors, as Emma was saying, are interacting very much, and the outcomes of these interactions are very often not predictable. And so I would say that in any case, this group of people and other colleagues that are not present today are really working in this direction. And so not only restoration, but also trying to understand what are the effect of different combination of stressors on our habitat and the threshold of change. Recently, we were writing a common paper on this issue, and I can tell you that for some variables, we are really at our infancy, and I regret to say that despite so many years working in marine ecology, but there are still many gaps. So we have to focus on several topics and to say, hey, European Union, take care. Not only restoration is a solid part of the story, but also other aspects that are still obscure.
Thank you, Simonetta. Among the question, there was that one that has been answered already, but I still ask it once more because I think it was interesting. It was raising the question of reintroduction of extinct species, and especially Cystorizera. So I think that's the whole point of this webinar. So I was wondering if Emma or Simonetta could answer this question to everybody.
I'm sorry for the mask, but I'm not alone. Yes, I was trying to answer to this question. Yes, some of these species are locally extinct, but for several areas, we have some baseline, not enough, but some baseline. So we know that in the past there were many species that were present there and unfortunately locally extinct. So the issue is, first of all, as Emma was saying, consider the reason of extinction, of local extinction. If the reasons are still there, no way, just forget it. If the reason for extinction are not there anymore, putting back species that were in the past present, well, I don't see the real issue. Yes, that can be genetic problems. So there is an ethical problems, let's see. If I take a species that was originally present in the Gulf of Naples and now is just present in Apulia, and I keep not the adult, but as Emma was and also Luisa were explaining, trying to put it back in the Gulf of Naples, I mean, I don't see a real risk. I see just the potential to have an habitat back which was present in the past. If again the drivers of loss are not present anymore, I'm just supporting the resilience of the system. And so I know that there are issues and big discussion about also the, let's say, the associated communities together with this movement of species. But if you use, for instance, just the apexes and you allow the recovery of the system, not using the adult, as I repeat, but using in situ or ex situ restoration, but considering just the apexes, I really don't see the issue. I don't know if Emma agree with me and Luisa.
I absolutely agree, and I think that actually, of course, this moving species can be a delicate issue, and in a case-by-case approach, it can be considered if it's worth moving the species or not to reconstitute ecosystem functions. We have the chance in marine restoration that we are late compared to continental restoration and what's happening in Earth. And so, for example, we won't do the mistake or transplanting exotic species as it has been done for decades in the continental forests. I mean, in order to reconstitute an ecosystem function of service, different species have been transplanted in several sites. So this is something that I absolutely agree has to be avoided now that we know that there can be a lot of consequences. And concerning moving the same species from abroad, I think we can mention two things. One, effectively, that there could be a kind of genetic pollution. You know, there could be a kind of changing the genetic structure in a place. So if we think that in the neighborhoods, for example, there is a very pristine population that has to be preserved and should not mix, so maybe we can consider not doing this action, depending on the balance of the positive recovering the ecosystem and the negative of potentially threatening of a pristine ecosystem. So this is something that we should consider, but also take into account, for example, that in several projects dealing with climate change, we are considering, they are, I mean, I'm not, in the infancy of restoration experiments, considering transplanting the same species from places that are considered refugees from climate change, just the adaptation to temperature. And so I think that we have to start thinking that if we want to preserve marine forests, their production, their richness, and the ecosystem services, we may consider moving species more than what we did until now, potentially. And I mean, the advices can be, the opinions can be different, and but this is an option, let's say.
Okay, we have another related question from Taous Moulay, who's asking, do you have any contingency plans in the event of a spill on these cystose areas?
A spill, so they escape of our restoration?
Yeah, that's the question, I think.
I guess now I'm talking while I'm thinking at the same time, so, and it's recorded, so it's not a good deal.
Spill.
Yeah, but I think that, for example, taking into it could be
oil spill. Sorry, are we talking about an oil spill on superficial?
No.
Spill of
the cystosaurus escape. So
yeah,
you want
exactly.
to restore an area, and there are cystosaurus in other. But of course, it can happen everything. But now, thinking about the vulnerability of these habitats, the low dispersion, and also the low dynamics, even if there is some area close to that we start to find cystosaurus, that I think that it's a good issue. Because structurally, we know that are more structured, higher biodiversity and all that the habitat we had there. But even if we decide that we have to take it off, it's possible because the dynamic of these species, it's very low. But we have to consider that what was before. Even, for example, we have a cystosaurus in area that we didn't know that it was we had with cystosaurus. Probably 200 years ago, it was plenty of cystosaurus because we do not have many historical data. But in the most pristine areas, when you go in an area that with not a lot of, in Corsica, for example, you have forests of cystosaurus everywhere of the different species. We do not have that in Catalonia, for example, in the Spanish continental coast, but it's because of the human impacts having historically. It's like 100 years that we are polluting the coastal areas. So, of course, this is issue, and it's something that it has to be discussed because, for example, I always think in another possibility. You want to restore an area that you know that you had a very vulnerable cystosaurus species, for example, and now you know that this cystosaurus species won't be able to live in this area, but you know that other cystosaurus that it's more resistant would resist there. What do? You don't do any restoration action, so you forget about having a more structural species, a more structural habitat with more ecosystem services than the simplest one because the cystosaurus is not the original one. I don't say that we have to do that, but it's something that in my mind is starting to, and then I know that there are a lot of ethical issues, but it's something that we should think about that. It's like, okay, now I know that maybe some cystosaurus from Greece are more resistant, for example, to climate change. What I do? I don't want to do more restoration action with our cystosaurus, our populations that are very vulnerable to climate change. And if I do that with one of the eastern part that are more resistant, our is to say that I will ensure a viability of the restoration. What do we have to do? This is questions that I do not have the solution. I don't know if you have, but that are, for me, it would be nice that someone with more knowledge on all these issues can help me.
Okay.
It depends on what the objective is, actually. I think that the first thing we always have to do is to focus the objective we have and find the better solution to do this.
Okay, we have one more question in that topic from Silvia Olivia Perez, who's asking, who has a question on what refers to restoring an area where there are previous records of a species, but where there has been a sort of shift on the state of the system, and it has been colonized by species that have modified the conditions and prevent the recovery of the species that has been lost. How would you proceed in that case and prepare the area for active restoration? Would you eliminate the species that has or have been recently colonizing the area? And she's talking about non-invasive species, but with a higher tolerance, for example. Do you get the question? Should basically can you read the question, or Emma?
I cannot read the question, and
Oh.
I didn't understood very well the question.
Well, the question, I think the question is, if you want to restore an area and it has been colonized by another species, how would you proceed? Should you first remove this this species that has colonized the area, or?
I guess that usually it's colonized by other species, because if not, it's because you have a barren and then you have too much grazers. So usually it's colonized by other species with higher growth and more simple. For us, we didn't need to eliminate the other species, and of course it's going to be impossible to eliminate all the other species. But maybe what you need to do is to provide some free substrate to avoid the competition of the recruits with the species you had before. So not everywhere, but if you put the fertile branches, or you put or you have new individuals, it's good to go before the recruitment season and to clean a little bit. I think that Simonetta has already done it in some places, or Sylvia, you did, to provide free substrate to the new recruits. Because there is some competition when, you know, this feedback of the simplest assemblage prevent to the recolonization of the new one. So not everywhere, but in some places, it will help a lot to the expansion of your restoration, for example.
Thank you, Emma.
The question is a little bit tricky, because Sylvia is specifically referring to species that modify the conditions and prevent the recovery of the species that has been lost. But what Emma was describing is something feasible, and it does not correspond to a, let's say, the full removal of the other species that are present in the area. So, well, I see restoration as something, I would say, very difficult to get. I mean, to have a real success and real upscaling in restoration is not easy. My message, for instance, is never to try something that is too much difficult and too much invasive in an area that has changed too much. So you really have to know previous condition, present conditions in terms of good environmental state, without thinking to do something too complex, without thinking to eliminate all the species that with time has colonized the area. So, because it's not, I mean, the final result will be very costly, too complex to be reached. I really suggest you to go for the protocols that we, as a common effort, we produced in Merges, because there you can find our simple but solid suggestion to do something that can be upscaled, and also this new idea of stepping stone restoration activity that I think Emma was to some extent introducing. So starting from small areas, but then trying to favor the connections between these small scale restored area. So go for a simple issue, because too much complex restoration action can be challenging, in my opinion.
Thank you, Simonetta. I think, Cyrielle, we have someone who's willing to ask a question live. Can you?
Yes, in fact, we have Maria Chiara Chantore, who raised her hand a few minutes ago. So, Maria Chiara, sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Well, first of all, well, congratulations. Very interesting results, a very interesting experience to share. And as you know, I'm contributing to a project, a small life project regarding Schistosera mentacea and Schistosera barbata outplanting. And similarly, we had some preliminary nice results also on a small scale, spatial scale, as Emma was pointing out earlier, and still on a short temporal scale as well. I want to address a couple of things. First of all, Simonetta, well, in the last comments, she raised a very important issue, in my opinion, because we really need, I think, to do some small scale experiments, to develop protocols, and I think that so far we have some reasonably well established protocols. Of course, they need to be adapted to other species, and of course this will need further experimental work, but we really need to move from the small scale to the large scale. Otherwise, I think that it will be also very difficult to face environmental changes that we are facing, the climate related, and also to stochastic climate events, because as soon as you don't have actually a pretty dense assemblage of Schistosera, and well, pretty dense and pretty large, of course it will be very difficult for it to not only to seed the surrounding, but also to resist to storms, because the environmental amelioration provided by the canopy itself makes a large difference in the possibility of the implants to resist. And also, if you have large densities, of course, well, most probably you have also provided, well, probably large enough genetic variability. So again, maybe you have some plants which are more resistant in the general. So this probably makes things again easier for the outplant for the restoration area, restored area to withstand environmental pressures. And also in the sense of how maybe the use of the coastal area will change in the future. I mean, if we want to make clear that an area where outplanting of Schistosera is restoration of Schistosera, sorry, is working. Well, we need to provide evidence to the stakeholders that it can be it is there, it can stay there for long, and so we can make sure that no other possible uses of the area, sorry for the for the telephone, of the area can maybe adapt, implemented in the future. Because if you think in a decadal scale, I mean, an area that presently is maybe devoted to running these Cestosaera experiments maybe will change use. And so, and unless we provide evidence that we have restored something that has a real high value, ecological in terms of course, functions and services and so on, I think it will be also difficult for us to provide evidence that we need to pursue this restoration. I don't know what you think.
Thank you, Maria Chiara. Any comments?
Thank you for this comment. Of course, we agree with your opinion, and it's true that also what you are doing with Cestosaera mentacea and compressa is very interesting, and actually, yeah, I think that should be capitalized in these actions. So I think that it's interesting to see all the different species we are dealing with, and try to find common points and also differences. So I don't know if maybe in the business club, I think that this is something that could be very interesting addressed. And so hopefully we'll start soon with a dynamic that will involve also the scientists that are not in the project, but they are working a lot and with very nice and positive results about restoration. And it's important to include this as Nadia presented in France, also with these collaborations of several people. So I don't know if others have other comments on.
Can I still speak or?
Of course.
Okay, sorry, I thought I was muted. I apologize.
No.
Yes, actually, I didn't finish my intervention earlier. But yes, I think that we really need, I think it's a very good opportunity, your business club, because I think that we really need now to engage with industries, engage with the engineers. I mean, because we can culture in the laboratory a few hundred tiles, for instance, for restoration. We can drill a few hundred holes on the rocks to place the tiles, but well, it doesn't really make a huge difference, particularly if the next year you have a huge storm and most of your tiles are destroyed, and even so the plants are good, so the environmental conditions are fine, maybe they can even reach sexual maturity, but I think that really, well, possibly in the new calls, restoration, where we have some established protocols, needs to start working hand in hand with industry. Otherwise, it will be very frustrating, in my opinion. So I really appreciate your idea of the business thing. That's what
I completely agree, and scientists always have a lot of ideas, but I think that at this stage, and especially for upscaling, as Simonetta said, we need innovation also, but for upscaling and for dealing with herbivores, for example. So I completely agree. I don't know if someone else wants.
Just a short comment, and in fact, in the last H2020, sorry, what we did as let's say the sequel of Merches. So we had the Merches 2, and really the central idea is exactly this one, to integrate science with private companies in this common challenge. So we really hope that it will be funded, because in Merches 2 we would have this opportunity to work together and to finally see if this challenging interaction is possible or not. Going back, to me, restoration is for sure very important activity with important consequences for our research, also because is pushing us very much in going back to understanding how our species work. So in finding very baseline knowledge that are supporting restoration, as I was, I think, saying during my speech. So finding how they work when, as Emma was saying, what they do, when they reproduce. I mean, the phenology, which is something that we think is given for sure, for most of species is not known at all, and it is also changing because the conditions are changing. So going back to combining very basic information about the biology and ecology of the species, to me, is central, and it is a gift from restoration. So the European Union is asking for scale up. We are answering, but at the same time, we are accumulating knowledge, that, as I repeat, is not really fashionable in general, but is absolutely needed if you want to provide a solid restoration framework.
Thank you, Simonetta. Actually, that was an interesting question that Nadia already answered through the site, but I'm still asking it because I'm very interested by the answer. The question was, how can you measure the positive or negative impact of your restoration effort in economic terms? So Nadia, maybe you could answer the question.
Thank you very much. We've done this kind of work in Merces. First of all, we've done a review on the subject, what kind of costs are involved, what kind of benefits and gains are involved for the different habitats we looked at. We also looked at specific cases of hypothetic large-scale restoration and what would be the cost and the benefits. We have a nice case study in Italy, which is working in review just now. And we're doing this in AFRIMED, where we apply the ecosystem services approach, where we look at the gains and the costs again in the context of the restoration and of the whole socio-ecological approach, socio-ecological system approach. So it's very interesting and ongoing. Unfortunately, Hazel, who is leading the ecosystem services work package, wasn't able to join us, but do stay tuned. And I gave my email, so if anybody wants to hear more from Merces or from our ongoing work, please do keep in contact. Thank you very much for the question, actually.
Okay, thank you, Nadia, for your answer. And well, there was no more question, so I think we should finish now. Thank you, Nadia, Emma, Silvia, Luisa, and Simonetta for your intervention. And I leave maybe Luisa to conclude the webinar.
No, your conclusion was perfect. No, I wish to thank all the speakers, of course. That it's hard work to prepare so nice presentations. And I also want to to thank all the participants for attending. And I hope you found this webinar interesting and enriching, and maybe now you have a new perception of marine forest in the Mediterranean Sea, or maybe not, because I see a lot of people like Chiara that already know that are specialists. And I also wish to thank all the ICO Solutions platform that included us in their nice initiative that will be presented in September as a collateral event of the IUCN World Congress, and Ciriel for the support, and Margalida, of course. So thank you very much.
Luisa, we have to take the picture.
The picture, the
take
picture.
a picture.
Smile.
Okay. I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure
I try with a print screen. Smile. You're right. This is deliverables.
Deliverables.
Deliverables. In Twitter.
Lida doesn't have her camera on.
Okay, fantastic. I took a second picture. And now I think so. Thanks again to everybody, and do not hesitate to join our business club and to contact us if you want to know more and visit the site, Mercies, AFRIMED, and thank you.
Thank you all. Really.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you, everybody.